There are only two noble corporal paths for the modern man: monk or marriage. Anything else is pure pleasure seeking effeminacy. So, after posting this quote on Twitter yesterday, many men commented asking me exactly what is meant by being a monk, particularly for the secular man or the layman, as most of us don't live in monasteries. In light of this, I decided today to open our call with a short talk on the 3 keys to monk mode mastery, which I will be available afterwards for some Yo Elliott Q&A, which I think you guys are going to enjoy. But before we get started, I'd like to address that anyone who's watching me on Facebook or Instagram, you guys right there, due to sensitive ears and totalitarian style censorship on the part of these platforms, at the conclusion of my opening talk, I'll be cutting off and proceeding for my Q&A to be only on YouTube. So you can join me there on my Elliott Hulse YouTube channel. I'll let you guys know a little bit more about how you can do that when we switch over. So let's begin. Wise men for millennia have chosen sacred seasons or to fully consecrate themselves to the monk mode lifestyle. And most recently, many young men are unable. Oh, what's going on? I'm getting unable to share my screen. I don't know what that means. Are you guys seeing my screen? Let's go. Yeah, it's sharing. I don't know why it's telling me that. Still working this stuff out. So let me restart. Looks like my screen is sharing. At least on Facebook it is. And I'm sorry, on YouTube it is. Yeah, it's still good to go. Let me double check, make sure everything's good before on only YouTuber that starts on time. Okay, cool. Split in half. Thank you. You guys can see it. Good. Let's keep going. I'll begin again. Wise men for millennia have chosen sacred seasons or to fully participate in the consecration of their lives to monk mode, right? A lifestyle. And most recently, many young men are either choosing to go their own way, as in MGTOW, altogether, or at least for a time while they gain a proper foothold on life. So today I'm going to share insights on the 3 vows taken by monastic monks and how they may be applied to the lay life for the advancing man like you. Okay, so where did my idea that the only 2 noble paths for men are monk and marriage come from, right? Sounds kind of crazy. So let's see, am I on the right thing here? Yeah. So it was my reading of the early church father, St. John Chrysostom, that this idea first came to me, specifically his homily on St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. So you're going to get a little bit of Bible time with old Uncle E right now. And I'm going to read from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 7, concerning marriage. Now, mind you, this talk is not about marriage. It's about monk mode. But I'm giving you insight as to where I learned about this concept that to be a noble man is to choose one of these 2 paths. And you'll see in a moment, one is more noble than the other. And I think a lot of you guys are going to like this. So this is St. Paul to the Corinthians concerning marriage. It is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due to her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another except with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. But I say this is a concession, not as a commandment. For I wish that all men were even as I am myself. But each one has his own gift from God, one in this manner and that another. But I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry. For it is better to marry than to burn with passion. So what is he talking about when he says, be like I am? In two instances, Paul says, if you cannot be like I am, then marry. In essence, he's saying, if you can't be a monk, right, then marry. And as you'll see, according to St. John Chrysostom, as he shares his homily on this, it's almost like Paul is kind of provoking you. He's provoking men and women by saying, look, if you can't be chaste, if you can't be celibate, if you can't be a virgin, because at this time, these people saw that as a virtue. Believe it or not, there was a time when being celibate, being a virgin, was a virtue. And dare I say, both these men probably died virgins. And as a result, they were venerated as such, unlike today, where every man thinks that by the time he reaches 12 years old, he needs to start having sex or starts masturbating, starts watching pornography, and he gets all wrapped up in the sins of fornication, porn, and pride. So let's continue. Let's hear what John Chrysostom has to say in relation to St. Paul's assertion. And so just mind you, this is John's words, John Chrysostom's words about what we just read. He's referring to Paul. He says, now concerning the matter about which you wrote, they had written to Paul and asked him if it was right for a man to abstain from relations with his wife. His answers to their questions, and he establishes rules for their married life, but places his reply within the context of virginity. It is well for a man not to touch a woman. It is as if he's saying, if you are searching for the best, the most lofty path, then do not take a woman at all. But if you want help and security in your weakness, he says, then look for a wife. Think about how provoking that is, right? If you must, if you're so weak that you can't control yourself, then find a wife. Now, mind you, he doesn't say, then find a prostitute, then find a promiscuous girl, then find a F buddy, then go and scroll through Tinder or Bumble. He doesn't say any of those things. He says, if you cannot be a monk, you cannot be like me, and you must, because you burn with lust, have sex, have a wife. Only two there, fellas. There's no in between, according to this that I'm sharing with you. I'll continue. Within marriage, both then and now, one of the two things likely to happen, either the husband wants to have relations with his wife, but she does not, or vice versa. Notice that he speaks of both situations in the same way. Some have claimed, incidentally, that St. Paul was asked this question in reference to the clergy, so on and so forth. Let me wrap it up to where he talks about what we're talking about. So he does not mention priests or teachers. He's speaking about men. His tone continues for the rest of the passage by saying, but because of the temptation to immorality, each man should have his own wife. So long story short, essentially, my assertion or my idea or how I gleaned the readings that I just presented to you is that St. Paul and St. John are both saying that it is noble, more noble, the height of nobility and virtue for a man to remain chaste. But if not, then he can enter into the sacrament of marriage, which, as the book goes on, he begins to explain, is a harder path, because now you're working towards sanctity with another person. So the only purpose of marriage in this regard, beyond the conjugal act, having sex because you're so weak that you can't be chaste, you can't be a virgin. Just think about, I'm saying this stuff, and it's tough for me to even digest, but I'm just sharing it to you as it is. If you're so weak that you have to have sex, well, then get married. But then in that marriage bond, the two of you owe each other your bodies, and your job now is to work together to get to heaven, as opposed to the man who chooses monk mode, monk life, celibate life, to work on his sanctity as is. I pose this question to you, and this is why let's go back. This is why I say what I say with such conviction. There are only two noble corporal paths, monk or marriage. Anything else is what? Pleasure-seeking effeminacy. What else is there? Let's consider the alternatives. You don't choose the monk lifestyle, or for a time, because we're talking about choosing monk mode for a style, for a moment, not a lifestyle. But I just want to just kind of like rub salt in this wound for a little bit to just give you the extreme. It is extreme of where I'm coming from when I say this crazy stuff, right? I tend to be extreme a little bit. What else is there? If you're not working towards the salvation of your soul by dedicating your life to monk mode, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that means here in a moment. But for a lot of guys, it's about if for a lack of religious sense, for most seculars, it's about being my best self, being my strongest self, building my frame, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of ills that are associated with it when you come to it from the secular standpoint. I'll show you in a moment. There's a lot of falling away from the sanctifying path, even though you're doing so-called monk mode. There's a lot more to it than what you guys are asserting it to be. So we're going to talk about that in a moment. But if there's not that, where you're being chased for a season or for a life, and it's not, I'm entering into the sacrament of matrimony for a lifelong union and sanctification of each other within the stronghold of marriage, then what else is there? Let's look at that as a spectrum. Everything else is void of what? Discipline, self-sacrifice, stoicism, mortification, strength. That's all those virtues I just described are associated with being a monk and associated with being a marriage. We all know that. You have to have discipline. You have to have commitment if you're going to be a monk or you're going to be in marriage. You have to have self-sacrifice. You have to have mortification. You have to have detachment if you're going to be successful in monk or marriage. In between, none of those virtues need to be exercised. I say in between. But off of that path, outside of that path, it requires no discipline to swipe right and have sterile transient sex. It requires no discipline to cohabitate with a girl for a time, shack up, have sex, play marriage, and then go separate ways. There's no virtue in bar hopping and picking up girls every weekend, bringing them back to your place, having sex. There's no discipline, commitment, devotion, virtue at all in any of those other paths. Ain't that crazy? You share with me, you tell me what virtue there is in anything beyond monk and marriage. Because all the fake relationships that we tend to have in between require no commitment, no discipline, no virtue at all. Even for the virtue of virginity as it relates to the young lady, because back in these times that was considered a virtue to be a virgin, and it was a father's responsibility to pass on a pure woman, his daughter, to a man. The promise was she's a virgin, right? Y'all don't get virgins these days. You know why? Because you're fornicating, because you're boning, because you're out there living unvirtuous, licentious, sinful lives, right? And I'm not finger wagging because I'm not much different than y'all. I was fornicating, and that's how I got where I'm at right now. but I can look at this stuff objectively, and that's why I bring it up to you guys. So, what about these 3 keys? Let's talk about that right now, because my invitation to you is to, not even my invitation, but my assertion is that many of you who are interested in going into monk mode, and there's so many reasons why I see young men going into monk mode, and I acknowledge it, right? And so for a time, men go into monk mode so that they can build up their strength, they can build up their education, you can build up your body, you can build up your finances, right? There are many different reasons why a young man would go into this so-called state of monk mode. And I understand that you guys, this is one of my more popular videos in the recent months, has been fully commit to monk mode. So I know that there are a lot of you that are considering this. And in fact, when I put up that video the other day, or I put up that quote the other day, a lot of men were asking me, Elliot, what do you mean by this monk mode? What are you talking about? Or better yet, how do we fulfill it? And so I decided today that I'm going to pull out some of what I've read, right? Because I'm not an expert in this. Don't be fooled. I ain't trying to act like I'm an expert in any of this. But I've learned amazing things from amazing people, and I read a lot of books. So let me share with you the 3 keys to monk mode mastery. Where did I learn this? So a few years ago, at one of my grounding camps, it was attended by this young Franciscan friar by the name of Arnold. And I was so fascinated by his choice to join a Franciscan religious order that he and I became friends and have since spent many hours on the phone talking about many things, including what his life was like in a monastery. And he also disclosed that that in every Catholic religious order, the monk, friar, or nun takes these vows. So let's talk about these vows. And then what I'm going to do is I'll mention the virtue of the vows, talk a little bit about why they do it, what it's about. And then I'm going to bring the opposite. I'm going to bring the vice that's associated with each one of those vows. So if we take these 3 vows as they do in the monasteries and apply them to our monk mode, right? A specific time in our life when we decide I'm going to go into monk mode. Because I know that's what it is for most of you guys. Most of you guys, it's not a matter of joining a religious order. It's a matter of, hey, I need to go into monk mode because I got to get a foothold on life right now. I got to build up myself in life right now. I don't need any distractions from women and other things, because we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about this as it relates to a full spectrum monk mode, not just refraining from women and fornication and pornography and stuff like that. That's one part of the full spectrum monk mode that I'm going to present to you guys here today. So what are the 3 vows that are taken by the religious, and how can we apply it to ourselves in a sort of layman's monk season? So let's see how this works. Number 1, can you guys see that? Nope. My screen's a little different than what you see here. Let's see. Number 1, yeah, you guys got that. We have poverty. So all monastics take a vow of poverty. That essentially means that I don't own anything. And in fact, before you go into a monastery, you sell all your goods and you give everything you have to the community, right? So a lot of you millennials who like socialism, right? Millennials are so funny, or socialists are really funny. Not all millennials are socialists, where they want communal living through communism because it sounds so fun, but they want the government to do it to everybody. I tell you what, if you have a communist mindset or a leaning, let me put it that way, a communist socialist leaning like we should all share, sell all your stuff and then go into a monastery. That's taking a vow of poverty and living in a communal setting. The problem is with communists, y'all don't have religion. You're not allowed to have religion. The state becomes your religion. Government becomes your religion. Anyway, I'm going on side rants right now. So the very first vow of a man going into the monastery and potentially living his life for a season in monk mode is poverty. I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. Let's continue. Number 2, chastity. A vow of chastity means that I'm not having sex. That's all. That's through and through what it is. Black and white, plain and simple. When it comes to the monastic life, you're not having sex with women. You're not having sex at all. Because I don't know, maybe these guys get bored and start wanting to do something together with all these guys. The point is, chastity is the second vow. You are chaste. I don't have sex. I don't masturbate. I don't watch pornography. I don't blow my load unless my load blows itself, essentially. And number 3, possibly, and then this is a tough one. This is a tough one. It's going to be a real tough one. It might even be more tough than chastity for a lot of you guys. But I'm going to explain to you, as I have been very recently, the power of this one. Because this was a hard one for me to swallow for a very long time in my own mindset. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this here for you guys as well. Drum roll, right? You guys are waiting as I move my screen around. Give me a moment. Poverty, chastity, obedience. Obedience. So when you go into a monastic life, you go live with the monks, you're a legit monk now. You no longer let your ego make the decisions for you. You no longer have, custody over yourself. You give custody over to your superior, right? I learned recently, actually I read this today, that the corporate structure, when you join a corporation, the corporate structure is modeled after the Catholic Church. And so this idea of obedience and hierarchy in an organization, well, I don't want to say it comes from them, but it's very inspired by it. But obedience. As a monk, you no longer live by your own will. You no longer make your own decisions. Everything that you do, you must ask permission. And if given a task, you must complete it. Now, of course, I want to put it out there that there is such a thing as righteous leadership. Because I know I can see y'all right now cringing. Cringe. Some slapdick's gonna tell me what to do. Who is he? Well, the type of virtue, the type of detachment, the type of discipline, commitment that is required to be a real monk means that I deny myself. Self-denial. Self-denial is perhaps one of the strongest masculine traits that we could develop. I know it doesn't sound that way in our very effeminate world where most men think like women and it's all about me, 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 me. Solipsism, right? What's that word? Solipsistic. S-O-L-O, solipsistic, solipism. I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but it basically means, I learned this word from Rollo Tomasi, and he talks about how women will always see things as it relates to their best interest alone. And it's based on evolutionary biology, where it's important for them to put themselves first above and beyond anything because they're the bearers of children. So for a woman to be solipsistic is normal. For men, no. Self-denial, mortification, discipline, that's normal. The difference between men and women, though, amongst many, is that men need to be taught how to be men. Did you know that? People like to denigrate me sometimes. They say, who needs Elliot to tell them what it is to be a man? The same men that needed fathers and grandfathers and elders to show men, to mirror for men, to demonstrate for men what it is to be a man. For a woman, it's a little different. It's more primal, it's more instinctual because, well, for both men and women, we come from the womb of our mother. So they kind of can relax into the grace of being what they came from. not a man. You cannot relax into the grace of what you came from, otherwise you'll stay a woman. You have to ascend towards masculinity. And therefore, you need hierarchy. You need fathers. But all that's been thrown out in our culture. Obedience, and you need to be obedient to your father. If you cannot be an obedient man, it's chances are it's because you didn't have a father, or because the culture is so disordered, you never respected your father, or your father never demanded respect from you or commanded respect from you. Obedience is a virtue. I'm learning this more. And now that I'm no longer a rebellious, an adult with a rebellious teenager's mindset. Most of y'all, a lot of y'all think like teenage girls with your rebellious mindset. I'm going to take a sip of water. Okay. So these are the three as they relate to the vows that someone that's going into a monastery would take. Now, it may not be practical for you and I. It definitely ain't practical for you and I. But we can still benefit from the sentiment from which these virtues proceed. And so there's a spectrum that we're going to describe. So if we're on the far right end of the spectrum, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, let's do this. Let's go all the way from one side to the other. The far side of this spectrum, the complete opposite of this with regard to poverty, let's start. The opposite of poverty would be excess or gluttony. Excess or gluttony. Right? So the opposite of a man who's taking a vow for poverty is a man who is excessive in his spending, he's excessive in his eating, he's excessive in his pleasure seeking, he's excessive in his carnal desires and wants and needs, greeds. Poverty, gluttony, ends of the spectrum. Chastity is addiction. Follow me. Robert Moore says, wherever there is an addict, there's a wounded lover. And we're talking about chastity. Wherever there's an addict, there's a wounded lover. It's addiction, or we'll call it lust, as it relates to, we're talking about the 7 deadly sins, right? A man who is chaste has custody over his senses. Lust isn't just about sex, y'all. Lust is about, I lust for alcohol. I lust for sweet foods. I lust for power. I lust for control. It's this drooling neediness for something that consumes you, consumes your senses. Lust. Different than gluttony, where gluttony is kind of excess. I want more and more and more. Where lust is a deprivation, a sensual deprivation that offers a hankering for. And I used the word addiction earlier as it relates to Robert Moore, because that lust never goes away if the root of it is not dealt with. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. So someone who's addicted, who has a lusting addiction, right? They'll get the thing, say it's alcohol. They'll get the thing, they'll get drunk, they'll feel terrible, but then tomorrow, I'm drooling for it again. Because this desire to fill a hole that leads to addiction cannot be filled by any creature, any created thing. But that's a different story. Let's talk about obedience, fellas. So the opposite of obedience is the foremost of all sins. It is what I will say is rebelliousness. That's how we see it manifest. But we're talking pride. Pride. I know what to do. I can do it. Only me. I feel like this. I think like that. This is my life, my story. Me, 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 me. I don't need anybody else. Someone who's obedient humbles himself to righteous authority. And anytime I talk about authority, I know I'm reiterating because it's a hot topic. It's a sensitive topic. Oh, you just mean I'm supposed to listen to whatever Joe Biden tells me? Right? Angela Merkel? I'm supposed to just do what these politicians say? That's not what I'm saying. It's not what I'm saying. Righteous leadership. And in my vision for a retrograde world, meaning going back to tradition, fathers would be the noble patriarchs worthy of obedience in our. I get it. A lot of you guys, you can't obey your dads because your dads are big slap dicks. Your dads have there's no integrity there to even want to obey your dad. But it doesn't have to stay that way, and it won't stay that way. It'll either change because God's going to send a deluge, wipe us out, and start all over again like he did in Genesis. Or maybe it's my hope and my mission per se that some of y'all are listening to me right now, right here, and you realize the value of becoming a strong, integrous, noble patriarch of your own family. I'm pro-family. Why am I pro-family? Because that means fathers get to raise sons to be virtuous, strong, powerful, alpha male leaders that will turn this S show around. Good. So we're not going to take this vow to the extreme. Most of us who are going to go into monk mode, right? Because we're just trying to get our life back on track. We're just taking a season, you know, and I don't remember what the word is called, but I remember a lot of my Hindu fans, they will tell me, Elliot, there's a season in life for a young man. I think they call it brahmacharya. There's a season called brahmacharya. I'm probably saying this wrong. And it is that a man, I think, younger than the age of 30 shall not look at a woman, shall not indulge in sensuality, shall not do anything that is effeminate, but dedicate himself wholly and fully to his path, right? However you want, that's a general term, his path. So think about yourself as a young man in brahmacharya. Is that correct? Some of you guys are telling me, yes, brahmacharya. I'm over here on YouTube again. Brahmacharya. I don't know that much about it, but I know you Hindus, if you guys in the chat there, he says, brahmacharya from age 13 to 25. Makes a lot of sense. Brahmacharya. It makes sense, don't it? Okay. So we're not going to go to the extreme because I understand, right? We gotta make concessions for what's going on here in the world that we live, but we can't stay as gluttonous pigs. So what we will do instead of being a gluttonous pig or living in pure poverty is to cultivate the virtue. This is going to be a wild one for you guys. A lot of guys, it's tough for you to swallow this one because the world doesn't acknowledge it. Contentment. Contentment. I don't know if I could fit that there, but to be content. Contentment. Don't ever be content. This is what the success gurus will tell you. You got content. Never be content. Never be content is one of the things that will tell you. That is the surest way to a life of misery because you'll always be chasing. You'll always be striving. You'll always be fighting. You'll never be settled with what? Gratitude for what you have right now. Contentment is the true path to happiness. Now follow me. The word happy, Happy, comes from what is happening. Happiness is being present with what's happening. And the only way that you can be present with what's happening, meaning like right here, right now, is contentment. What does that look like practically? It means not having, if you think about, let me put myself in a monk mode, man, right now, and display contentment for you. And the contrast to where many of us are living when we're not in monk mode, when we're not on this virtuous path, brahmacharya, right? We're daydreaming about that car, that house, that money, my business, my hobbies, girls, going on Instagram and wanting what I see. But even worse, all those things, because they could be chalked up as lust. Even worse, what really makes this diabolical, destructive, and a vice is you're looking at all those things, thinking about all those things at the expense of gratitude for what's right in front of you. Take up this practice during your next monk mode, or if you're in monk mode right now, take up this practice of daily gratitude for the most mundane things in your life. Think about a monk who's legitimately in a monastery. He don't own anything anymore. Thus, everything that comes to him, he's grateful for because he didn't get it. It was provided. Also, looking at life from that lens is another way to cultivate gratitude such that you can allow yourself to sink into contentment. What do I mean? Know that all things are added to you. Take the humble approach that I didn't make all these things happen, but God's grace brought them into my life. Thank you. A daily sense of thanks, a daily sense of gratitude. It took me a long time to figure this one out too, because I got a big ego. And I tend to think, oh, I did this, I did that. But humility comes from humiliation. And after enough humiliation, I began to look at my life and realize I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't do that. I was lucky about that. Wow, that was good timing. Wow, I didn't do that. Somebody else helped me do that. You see what I'm saying? What's an analogy I could use for this? A light bulb. For a light bulb to be turned on and to marvel in its own luminescence. Look how bright I am. I am bright. I got glass. I'm a nice shiny glass. I have this filament on the inside and it's so red hot that it lights up this whole, and the glass and the light bulb forgets, hey bro, that electricity pumping through you is turned on by the light switch. You didn't do all that. It's passing through you. Think about all the good things in your life. Think about even just the things that help sustain you in your life. Food, it's just passing through you. Everything you have is just passing. We just passing through. You don't own anything and nothing's given to you, or you don't get anything. It's given to you. Right? That's about the unfoldment of life. Contentment. Take some time and meditate on what it is to be content and consider the disdain thereof and how bad it is, how unresourceful it is to have disdain for content. Lust. We are going to consider, well, what did I write here? So I wrote, I thought about this earlier. This is a matter of custody over your senses. But the virtue would be mortification. Mortification. I know you guys can't see that. I don't have much room on these sheets. Mortification means being dead to your senses, meaning have custody over your eyes, have custody over your ears, have custody over your taste, have custody over your sense of touch and comfort. For example, having custody over one's eyes would mean to divert your eyes when a woman passed by. Chastity, as Christ even says, isn't about having sex or not having sex. It's about thinking about having sex. So by mortifying by having custody over your eyes, having custody over your senses, mortifying your senses, you cut lust off at the pass. A lot of us, we say, I struggle with lust. You don't struggle with lust. You struggle with subjecting yourself to temptation that opens up lust. If you're in monk mode, you should erase all TikToks, all Instagrams, all Facebook accounts that tempt you into lust. Any girl, I don't care who she is, who's putting booty pictures on your Instagram, you must delete. Any apps that you have, any websites that you pass by, any places that you go where you know you'll be tempted, you must either cut off those temptations completely or have full custody over your senses. Once again, eyes. This is like, for example, let me bring it to a sort of a different example that you might relate to. Say you're fasting, or more practically, you're dieting, right? I got to get ripped for the summer. I got to lose some weight. So I'm not going to eat pies and cookies and donuts and pastries. Okay, good. No problem there. I'm just not going to eat that. But you walk past, when you go to the mall, this is so crazy. How do they do that? There's these places, I think they put a fan to waft all the smell of the pastries. You walk into the mall and they waft in pastry smell at you. So you smell that, and then all of a sudden, guess what happens? It goes straight to your unconscious. The same way that when you smell that smell and then you start salivating, you didn't do anything. It wasn't your fault. You're lusting now, but it wasn't because you choose to lust. It was a response to the not having custody over your senses. Those people are being violent. Those people who are wafting those smells in the mall to make you want to come over with your mouth drooling, like, oh boy, I think I need one of those donuts. They're being violent towards you because imposing upon the custody of your senses. Same thing with these young ladies who are posting up these booty pictures on Instagram. They're being violent towards you. And as a monk or a man in monk mode, you must think of it this way. And then you can grow disdain, because disdain is a strong thing. It's a good thing sometimes. When you see these girls and you realize, man, the way she's dressed and the way she's walking and switching her hip, she's trying to tempt me. Turn your eyes away. In disgust, turn your eyes away with disdain. Remove all near occasion of sin, all possible temptation. If you're in monk mode, mortify your flesh. I like that word mortification, because what is something that's mortal? Dies, right? What's to mortify is to die to. Allow your senses to die to temptation. Mortification. So that contentment, right? While you're in monk mode, be content and mortify your flesh. And then pride. The opposite of pride here, I'm going to use a word that many of you're going to like this word, but I'm going to preface it by a phrase that some of you might struggle with. The opposite of pride is obedience, of course. But now how do we practice this as a layman in our world? I'm just a regular dude. I'm going to school, or I got a job, whatever it is. Who am I being obedient to, right? Of course, you want to be obedient to your teacher and to your boss. You have no choice, otherwise you lose your job or you fail your test. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about as a man in monk mode who's working to develop himself, he must subject himself to uniformity with God's will. And the word I'll use is stoicism, to be stoic. How do I bring those two together, right? Because it almost sounds like in one instant, Eliot is sounding like a Catholic. He's saying uniformity with God's will, which, by the way, there's a great Catholic book by a Saint Alphonsus Liguori, Saint Alphonsus Liguori, who has a book, and the Audible is great, called Uniformity with God's Will. And in it, he talks about various different instances where we get to literally just walk with God in all that we do. And there are stories in the sayings of the Desert Fathers, who are the very first monastics and monks and hermits in the first century after Christ, A.D., right? The year of our Lord, Adnam Diem. The first century, these monks that went out into the desert to go live. There are stories about how they went to extremes in order to subject themselves to uniformity with God's will. Here are some of the examples, and I'll tell you in a moment why I use that word stoic. Some of the examples of uniformity with God's will is taking what comes to you without complaining. For example, I'm driving and now there's traffic. Driving, traffic. Rather than and resisting it, you allow yourself to have uniformity with what is. It's God's will that you're in traffic right now, or you wouldn't be in traffic. Uniformity with God's will. I am sick. I'm getting sick, and I'm pissed off because I was going to be a monk and I was going to do all these great things and I was going to start working out and I was going to build some muscle, but now I'm sick. I have this stomach virus, or I have even worse, I have like a disease like what is it? That starts with a C? You know, colitis. I have colitis now, and all the food I'm eating is passing right through my butt. Being angry is a function of your pride and disunity in uniformity with God's will. Accepting it and saying, I will do what I can, but this is God's will, is uniformity with God's will. It is also very stoic. And I know that the Stoic philosophers have grown in popularity in recent years, as they should, because there's a ton of Stoic crossover in Catholicism. And the Stoics, they totally get it. Uniformity with God's will, the Stoics get it. And if you read Seneca as well as Marcus Aurelius, you'll hear things like, it's God's will for things to happen. Do not judge, do not interfere, don't resist. The word stoic actually, I think, comes from the word stool, which means to be seated. When I'm talking about uniformity with God's will, it means be seated, meaning, okay, it is what it is. I accept it as it is, and I'm not going to complain. For us, the biggest issue here as a layman is obedience, meaning it's going to be whatever it is. Don't complain. That's a big part of it. Don't complain. And as the Stoics would assert, don't even try to do anything about it. Did you ever hear this? The Stoics are crazy. But if something is just presented to them, they just go with it. It's God's will. It's the will of the gods, according to the Stoics. And so I'll leave you with this one last story about one of the Desert Fathers. There's a story about one of the Desert Fathers where he's taken a vow of obedience in that he will eat. This was how he consecrated himself. He said, I will only eat what people give me, like a beggar. But he wasn't a beggar. He was living in the monastery with his brothers. So he depended fully on his brothers on what he would eat. Now, these guys would do very extreme things. Like some of them, they would sleep standing up. They would put themselves in a crack between two walls and they would sleep standing up. or they would fast like for days and weeks and just on and on and on. So they did a lot of wild things. And this is just a wild thing that one of them did. He said, in uniformity with God's will, full obedience, I will only eat what's presented to me. And a lot of his brothers used to tease him. They would mess with him. I think I remember hearing that they gave him a sandal once. They boiled a sandal. You think that these guys in the monastery would like be nice, right? They boiled a sandal and they gave it to him. And he ate it and said not a word. So there you have it. Contentment. If you're wanting to practice monk mode for a while, it goes above and beyond just virginity or chastity in the sexual sense, right? It's a matter of poverty, chastity, and obedience through the practice in our daily lives of contentment, mortification, and stoicism. And with that, I am done. That went a lot longer than I thought it would. I wanted to share that here with you guys. So let's see. I'm going to cut off from Facebook and I'm going to stick around for my YouTube fans and friends. Love having you guys here. And if you wanted to get a question answered from old Uncle E, send me a super chat. Let's see. I got to stop sharing. And then I got to go to. So give me a moment while I cut myself off from Facebook. And you guys over here on Instagram, I have my phone up for Instagram. Go to YouTube and just search Elliot Hulse. Go to my Elliot Hulse channel. You see a picture of me when I'm balding with a beard because I'm a shapeshifter. I have lots of different looks. Go find me on YouTube and hang out for the next hour. You can ask me questions there. The problem is, if I hang out on Instagram, I might say something that they don't like, and they already kicked me off of TikTok again. So I'm not risking it. So that's it, guys. I'll see you there. Done. Okay, now I'm on Facebook. Give me a moment. Colleen's already sending me questions, so this is good. Okay, how do I end this? I'm on my Facebook wall right here. How do I turn off Facebook Live? Edit live video? Delete post. How about that? I don't want to delete it. I just want to turn off the live. I want to end the live. This is strange. I think it'll be an easy thing to do. Maybe I can do it from my stream. Let's see. Edit event. Well, I'm just gonna delete the post because I gotta move on. Video. All right. Off. Good. Now we're going to Facebook. Cool. All right. So I think Colleen already started sending me some super chats that you guys sent over. So I'm going to go take a look at that now. Okay. Very good. Let's end this. Okay. This is from Jonathan Cataresi. Yo, Elliot, what are your thoughts on the belief that Jesus was a mystic and his gifts were learned from Eastern mystical traditions, meditation, and the development of his soul and spiritual gifts? I don't give it much credence because why? Right? What would that do for me if I were to ascend to that belief, especially given that I don't know the sources of it, right? It's very difficult for me to trust. I have a hard time trusting. That's why I'm a conspiracy theorist. I have a hard time trusting. So when I do finally trust, it's because I've had to work towards it. A lot of these new ages, we just give our assent to that don't necessarily deserve it. There's no 2,000 years of tradition that's associated with it. See, a part of why I'm willing to give assent to the teachings of the Catholic Church is because there are 2,000 years of tradition. But a lot of ideas that sort of just popped up out of nowhere, but thus, dare I say, maybe subversion ideas that are subversions, meaning they're meant to subvert the authority of the church and subvert the authority of Christ by undermining what he says and who he says he is and who the church says he is, all of which I wouldn't venture to doubt comes from Jewish mysticism, Jayish mysticism, right? So to say that Jesus was a mystic is almost runs contrary to the contrast that he was creating between he and the Pharisees. Because, again, I'm going to say some weird things, but the people that we call Jews today, I'm not so sure are the Jews that are in the Bible. I think they may be different. But he's referring to quote unquote Jews for the most part when he's speaking to the Pharisees. And a lot of these Pharisaical ideologies that he was denigrating when he would speak to them and call them a den of thieves and stuff like that. He called them hypocrites and stuff like that. They were practitioners of Jayish mysticism. So I don't think Jesus could have been a Jewish mystic when he's constantly denigrating the sect called the Pharisees of Jayish mysticism. But I wouldn't doubt that the Jayish mystics that still live today, who we perhaps are now calling Jays, infiltrate these ideas about Jesus being an Eastern guru and a mystic in order to subvert the power, the ideology, the strength of conviction of traditional Catholics. And so that's where I am with that. I don't give assent to that idea. Next. Let's see. This is Joe Hughes, Jorbil. By the way, thank you for your super chat. Dude that I just answered your question. I forgot your name. And then thank you to Jesus for your $20 super chat, man. Much appreciated. Gives me reason to show up here with y'all. I like making this money too. This is fun. I'm having fun and making money. I really appreciate you guys. You make my life what it is. Okay, so yo, Elliot, I am 19 and have ambitions, but have a hard time being disciplined and finishing projects. How can I get better at both of those things? And tips for practicing it would be awesome. Thank you. having a hard time finishing things and bouncing around with stuff is an indication of addiction to sensation. It's addiction to emotion. And this comes from the culture that we live in that tells us that we must be passionate about anything that we do, right? This whole idea that everything I do must be colored by some positive emotion. If I'm going to do this work, or I'm going to do this project, or I'm going to complete this thing, I have to wait for the muse of emotion and passion and good feelings to carry me through. And if that passion goes away, well, then I have nothing to carry me any longer. This is a part of the reason why relationships don't work. Because if I love you, but I'm not in love with you, as many women say, what they're basically saying is, I'm not raptured by emotional excitement anymore. Thus, this relationship must end. And it happens to men now too, because Disney. It happens to us because the media, because we've been taught that you need to feel your feelings and trust your feelings, and that all of life is about following your special star, and that you're a snowflake, and also helicopter moms, and living in this world where every time a child cries, he gets coddled, or anything that he wants to eat, any sweet, any junk food, he gets it. Oh, do you want me to buy you the latest game? You want me to buy you designer clothes? Even poor people, they coddle their children. What does that teach boys? It teaches us that we are entitled to good feelings before we do anything. And if those good feelings go away, then I'm not doing it. Think about even dessert. I don't like this. My wife started this practice with my kids, and it's a bad habit with them. It was one of the things I didn't want to have happen. I don't get everything I want. Dessert after eating. So eat your peas, eat your steak, and you'll get dessert. What is that teaching you? That's teaching you that, oh, I do these things so that I can feel good afterwards, so I can get a hit, so I can get sensual gratification. We've got to remove ourselves from the addiction of sensual gratification and the need for passion to always carry us. Here is some advice from Edmund Hulse, who's my father. The key to success in your life, the key to success in your life is to get up every day and do what's in front of you, whether you feel like it or not. He says, be a machine. I know that blows most of y'all mind because you say, no, I'm a snowflake. But my dad is saying, no, this is like the obedience thing before. It's so hard for us to adopt these truly masculine sentiments. And I get denigrated all the time for saying these things. You got to get up every day and be like a robot. Oh, I don't want to just be a robot. I want to be special. Oh, I don't want to just be a cog in a machine. I remember saying the same stuff until I grew up and I realized my dad was right. You will always be a cog in a machine. You will always have to work. It was Adam's curse in the garden. That's the assignment God gave Adam after he fell. Adam and Eve wanted to know what it's like to be God, right? He fell into effeminacy. He was like, oh, I want to be my own God. So God said, oh, okay, cool. Then guess what? You got to work now every day. You live by the sweat of your brow. You're assigned to work. So you're going to work regardless of what it feels like. Suck it up. Set a plan to do what you want to do, what you need to do, and get it done. I struggle too. I talk tough, but I struggle. I'm not too different than you guys. That's why I know this stuff, because I have to overcome my own demons. I'll give you one last piece, and I wrestle with this. I look at it almost on a daily basis. Distractions. I set about to do X, Y, Z. I got X done. I got Y done. But right before I'm about to finish Z, ABC shows up. Oh. But ABC, what do I do? Make a practice. because I was talking to my King Transformation students yesterday. By the way, MakeMenStrongAgain.com. Watch my free masterclass. Join my coaching program, and you get a whole lot of old Uncle E. That made me forget what I was going to say. I can't even do a commercial without remember what I was going to say. What were we talking about yesterday? Doing what you got to do. Do what's in front of you. Don't get distracted. Well, anyway, you have to sign up. You have to sign up for my program to know what I was going to say, because I said it yesterday. But I think I gave you $20 worth there, bro. You just got to do what's in front of you. Don't be addicted to the feelings. It's about the feelings. It's about emotions. Check your emotions, and you'll be in good shape. Okay, how do I? I'm trying to get to the next one. This is Altinus. Altinus, thank you for your super chat, bro. 10 pound super chat. Yo, Elliot, I want to marry and create a family. I have friends who are still chasing women and think they are alphas. They are pleasure-seeking men. I am done with that kind of life. Should I cut them from my life? You don't need to cut them from your life. They're just going to drop from your life. They're going to leave your life, because as you become a man on your path, you will quickly realize, I can't travel this road if I'm carrying rocks with me. You don't have to do anything to let go of things that you've become aware are no longer serving you. Let me give you an example. First, before I give you the example, I'll give you this quote. Awareness is transformative in and of itself. Meaning, by mere virtue of the fact that you know what you want, you know what you don't want, and you can see the gap between, i.e. your friends, means that's going to change you without you having to do anything. You're just going to fall away from them. They're going to fall away from you. Here's the example. This is Osho in his book Awareness. He says, if you're carrying a sack of rocks, you're walking around and for years you've been slapping this sack over your shoulders and walking around with a sack of rocks. You don't know what's in that sack, but you've just been doing it for so long. And there you go about on your path, you walk in with that sack of rocks. Never really stop to think about what's in it, right? Just like you never really stop to think about, are my friends resourceful for where I'm going right now, right? You're carrying a heavy weight. But you don't know. You don't know, because you just don't know what you don't know. And if somebody comes and taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, buddy, what you got in that bag? And you drop the bag, you look in and you realize, but damn, there's some rocks in here. There's just no value, dirty, big, heavy rocks. Then you pick up your bag and you put it across your shoulder, because that's all you've been doing, right? You're just living with your friends. You're doing your friends because that's what you've been doing. And a little way down the road, you start thinking. And you're like, man, there's rocks in this bag. And then you start realizing, it's heavy. Why am I carrying this bag of rocks? You'll just by and by set the bag down and keep walking. Nobody has to force anything. Nobody has to convince you. You don't have to push the bag away. Right? We think that we need to make some kind of big effort when we're trying to drop baggage on our life. Now, that bag may want to, with your friends, they may want to crawl back and come back to you, but you're so busy going that you just say, hey, I'm going this way. I'll see you later. No harm. That's the other thing too. If you have emotions about it, it's going to cause you a problem too. Have no harm, no foul. Don't be mean to your friends. Don't tell them about themselves. Don't try to convince them. None of that. Just like that bag of rocks, you set it down and you keep walking. If by and by you walk around, you see that bag of rock again, you say, hey, old bag of rocks, I remember carrying you. How you doing? Okay, cool. You're still there, right where I left you. All right. Well, have a good day, bag of rocks. Just like you'll do with your friends. You don't need to do anything. So you say, I want to have a family and I want to marry. Good. You know what you want. You know the path that you're on. Your friends are doing what they're doing. They're like a bag of rocks. Let them be. Let them be. And you be you. Hey, so we got Ted Sarmiento $4.99 super chat. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Let's see. Colleen has been sending me some messages. Let me make sure that I'm getting to them. Christian says, thank you. $10 super chat. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Okay. All right. I've gotten to all the ones that she sent me so far. So what do you guys think about that monk or marriage talk? Did you guys enjoy that? Did you guys gain any value from old Uncle E's rant on that subject? I'm going to check out the chat and see who's talking to me. Oh, we got another question here. Thank you, Devin Vance, for your $5 super chat. Devin Vance, he says, I've been dealing with health issues, gut issues, and it's been affecting every aspect of my life, especially my wife. How do you overcome this? I don't know how you overcome your gut issues. That's something that you would need to speak to a practitioner about, right? I could give you ideas, but I'm just pulling stuff out of my butt if I'd say anything to you. But remember what we were talking about, monk mode. That whole talk on monk mode was really about virtue. And you get to, in this instance, practice some virtue. You get to practice the virtue of detachment. You get to practice the virtue of uniformity with God's will, stoicism, right? Listen to that audiobook, or you could even go on YouTube. It's Alphonsus Liguori, Uniformity with God's Will. And he talks about sickness in that book. And if you can, I'm not saying don't try to find a cure. Just don't ask me about it. I don't know it. But if you want a perspective, a paradigm from which to approach this, uniformity with God's will. God has willed this for a reason. Mainly, God wills things for the sanctification of our soul. Meaning, just like a good coach is going to give you a heavy barbell, he's going to make you run suicides, or he's going to make you do something just painful because, hey, that's going to make you stronger, bro. Just do it. God does the same thing. And if you, the same way you pay money to that trainer to beat you up so that you can get better, pay gratitude to God. Thank you for afflicting me in this way so that I can learn the practice of humility. I can learn the practice of mortification and contentment. This is an opportunity. Every challenge is an opportunity for virtue. And you're getting the opportunity right now, brother. So I hope that helps. Ted Sariento. Yo, Elliot, the pandemic made me weak. No gym. Terrible eating habits. I picked up a terrible vaping habit. Prayer and faith will put me back on track again, right? Male nurse from New York. No. Prayer and faith alone ain't going to do nothing for you. Prayer and faith alone is empty, useless when you're sinning. Christ even says this. He says, repent and know that the kingdom is upon you. The very first, when Christ proclaims his mission, the first words out of his mouth is repent. The first word out of his mouth isn't pray and have faith, right? Because that's not the first step. That's not the salvific step. That's not the step into transformation. The first step into transformation is looking at yourself, cringing because vaping is disgusting, and throwing it away, turning around, and not going back. That's what repent means. Repent means recognize how stupid you are for doing what you're doing, right? Just like the prodigal son, he wasted all his money on prostitutes and drugs, right? He wasted all his father's money. And then one day he realizes, he's like, damn, what did I do? I wasted all his money. And he turned around and comes back. Read the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son in the New Testament. And also read the proclamation of the kingdom of God, which is what Jesus says, repent. You get to repent. Look at how stupid you are. Look at yourself objectively. Wow, damn, I'm dumb. Vaping. And I don't know who I heard say it, But a grown man vaping is such a silly thing to watch. You're sucking on like grape flavored smoke? What are you, a little kid? It's like an adult candy cane blowing clouds. You're entertaining yourself. You're being extremely effeminate. But I get it. Nicotine is addicting. I've been there before. So turn around and stop the stupid, effeminate bubblegum vaping, you big sissy. Mr. Mike 77, thank you, brother, for your $4.99 super chat. Much love, much love, much love. Appreciate you guys. David MX, $100. Thank you, bro. Much love. I appreciate that. Okay, David, let me get to your question, brother. Age 30, I discovered seed retention and NoFap in mid-2020. I'm almost 1 year full-on monk mode. I started to question and feel bad about losing my V card when I was young. How can I handle this? You handle it by not having an opinion about it, right? You did what you did. You not only see the folly in it, but you've turned around. The only reason to look back and to have a judgment or a feeling about it is if you like dancing with the devil. Satan is always trying to make you feel guilty, trying to make you feel ashamed for something that you've already been forgiven for. And don't let me come across as your average born again Christian who says that you're forgiven just because Jesus died. I don't go by that. You're not just forgiven because Jesus died. You're forgiven because you repented. That's Jesus' first word. Repent. You did something about it. So you said, oh, I'm screwing up. I screwed up. Let me stop. Let me amend my life and do a different way. You're there, bro. You're there. You're going to cause more problems for yourself by constantly thinking about what you did in the past rather than just moving forward and being grateful that you were saved. That's another thing I'll put that out there also too, that by the grace of God, you were saved. By the grace of God, you found out about semen retention. You stopped jerking off. And then, you know what a beautiful thing is? When you repent, you cringe about your stupid behavior, you turn around and you stop doing it, and you start walking in a state of grace, God then opens your eyes. He takes the blinds off your eyes so that you can see the sins that you were committing before. Because when you're in a state of mortal sin, you can't see your sins. Thomas Aquinas talks about how when you sin, your intellect is darkened. And you might say, well, how does that happen? How is it that when you sin, just by sinning, your intellect is darkened? Follow me. When you sin, you have to justify your sin in order to overcome the guilt and the shame and, the exposure of being a sinful guy. So we say, that's not that bad. Everybody jerks off. Everybody fornicates. Everybody does drugs. Everybody watches porn. It's not even that bad. My friends are doing it. I see it on TV, right? It's actually, maybe it's healthy for you. Scientists say that jerking off and blowing your load is very good for you. It's going to make me better with the girls, so I won't be a premature ejaculator. So what you start doing is that rationalization hamster, right? That's what they say when women do it. That rationalization hamster starts turning, and so you cannot see your sin any longer. That's what he means by your intellect is darkened. So you need to be grateful. Thank God that your intellect has been enlightened because you turned away from your sin. And when you turn away from your sin and you walk in a state of grace, then the light starts coming and you can look back and say, I can't believe I did that. You couldn't see it when you were in it. You can only see it when you're out of it. And that's a grace from God. So that's how you handle it. You just be grateful that you got out of it. I cringe about a lot of things that I did in my past, but I don't harp on it. I don't think too much about it. In fact, you could say a nice little prayer. You could just ask God to erase it from your memory. You say, God, give me the grace, please. You gave me the grace to amend my life. Give me the grace to forget this stuff. Erase it from my memory. Because that's where the demons screw at you. They mess with you in your mind and your emotions. Don't trust your mind. Don't trust your emotions. So that's my opinion on that, dude. Done. Devin Vance. What up, Unc? I have a problem with projecting my voice. My throat always feels tense and I can't project my voice like you. Any tips on how to open up? So bioenergetics and specifically open front breathing is what I call it. But open front breathing in and of itself is not going to be enough. You're going to need to you're going to have to make noise. So let me give you just a little biology, a little bit of bioenergetic biology. You have 3 diaphragms. Your throat is a diaphragm. And if you notice, look, if I put pressure on the diaphragm, it relaxes it, opens it up, and all of a sudden, because I have an open throat, my voice is deeper, right? I'm simply just pressing on a diaphragm. Just think about if you put your fingers on a drum diaphragm, it changes the sound, right? So I'm doing that with my throat. It opens it up. Also, by pressing on that, my throat opens and air can pass in and out much easier. See how strained it is when I move my hand? You got a diaphragm here, your solar plexus. And your solar plexus is what you project with, right? You say that I feel tense in my throat, but think about it this way. It's a pyramid. And what comes up from the bottom pushes out through the top. There may be constrictions along the way, but the real power comes from below. So you have 1 at the top, right? You have 2 in the middle. And just think about it. Your diaphragm, this diaphragm, your solar plexus, as you breathe into your belly, and we're going to talk about breathing into your balls in a moment, your diaphragm drops. And just think about your solar plexus like it's a slingshot. You know these like little, when you was kids, we used to take like balloons and put it around like a milk container top, cut it off, and we put rocks in it. Right? So it's like you got a hole and you put a rock in it, and then you take the balloon, bang, and you just hit stuff. That's a diaphragm. Think about this as a diaphragm. You want that diaphragm to drop so that you could whoo, pop right out, right? Just like a bang, just like a slingshot. So you got diaphragm number 2. Diaphragm number 3 is your pelvic floor. And so when I talk about breathing into your balls, I'm talking about pulling the power up from down in your perineum, your pelvic floor. And so you got to relax that down there too. Watch my videos on bioenergetic breathing, bioenergetic stool. And then, of course, I got my crazy bioenergetic catharsis video. But all that now is when those diaphragms are relaxed, you can now start to vibrate them. And what is sound? Sound is vibration. So bouncing and literally, like I do in that video, I say, shake your balls. What I'm doing is all those diaphragms are bouncing. And when I say you got to let your balls shake, it means you got to recognize that a lot of us have a tight pelvic floor. And so if you can actually relax down in your perineum, right? They call it your taint, right? Because it taint your balls and it taint your butthole. It's right in between. You relax your taint and you let your pelvis rock like this. And you open your throat, you're sending shock waves up through your diaphragms, out through your mouth. So you got a little bit of Elliot Hulse acting crazy for you. Bioenergetics. You can even hear my voice too. Bio is gonna help you. Am I frozen? Why do I look like I'm frozen? You know, I gotta turn this Turn my phone off. I noticed that my Wi-Fi is so bad that my wife sends me, if she sends me text messages, it pauses my thing here. It's coming through my computer, but I want to put this on. I see a bunch of questions here coming from you guys. I'm going to answer them here in a moment. I just want to make sure I wasn't on what Wi-Fi I was on, man. Living out here in the country. It ain't easy. It ain't easy. Bad Wi-Fi. Okay. Let's see. Keep sending them because they'll come to my computer also. Yeah, I see some of them coming through. Thank you, wife. Okay. Let me get to these ones that are on the screen right now so they don't go away. Can you give, this is, thoughts on identity crisis. Mr. Mikey Nike, Mr. Nike Mike. Can you give us your thoughts on having an identity crisis and knowing who you are and what you want? I feel like over time, I jump from one personality to another. I don't even know who I am. How do you discover your true self? Well, welcome to the club. I'll say, first of all, I tend to have a lot of personalities, and I used to be upset with myself about it. And then I realized that I'm just a multifaceted guy. And so your ego is your interface with the world, right? And so who we are, how we show up, or even how we identify with ourselves is usually with regard to the ego. And as a construct, which is what the ego is, it can be stuck or it could be pliable. And it could go through seasons of pliability, which actually is cyclical. There are cyclical seasons of ego pliability. I learned this when I was going through a sort of crisis, identity crisis of sorts, when I turned 36. And I forgot who I was, or I wasn't comfortable with who I was or who I was becoming. And then I started learning about the process of masculine initiation. And then I learned about the cycles of initiation as they happen through the stages of life. And then I started talking about, as I was learning, about these 12-year cycles. And I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about it, but depending on how old you are, age 12, there's a crisis, right? Because you're literally going from boy to teenager, right? Boy to teenager, that's when the hormones come. Age 24, it was the strangest thing because for the longest time, the median age of all the followers that I had on YouTube was 24. And for many, many, many years, almost everybody I would ask in my camps or at my programs or anything like that, I asked, how old are you? 24. And it started to make sense to me when I turned 36, because I was another 12-year interval. And I looked back and I was like, wow, all the 12-year-olds, all the 24-year-olds, all the 36-year-olds, i.e. midlife crisis, or 49, right? Because that's the next cycle, the next cycle of 12. There are these essential identity crises, but they are predictable. They're predictable cycles. Believe it or not, if you can study, what's the name of this author? Well, I'll talk more about it another time, but this whole process of initiation I learned from Robert Moore. So you can basically accurately predict that there's going to be a season of usually about 3 years every 12th year. So it means 12, 13, 14, 15. Then you start figuring yourself out about 15. 24, 25, 26, 27. Then you start figuring yourself out about 27. 28, 29, 30, 31. I'm sorry, 36, 37, 38, 39. By 40, I started figuring myself out again. So these identity crises, I share this with you so that you know that these are normal cycles of ego breakdown and reconstruction. And that's what I was talking about, ego firmness. Our ego is most firm towards the end of a 12-year cycle. And I don't know what age you are, so a lot of this is, I guess you could say, theory. I'm just throwing it out there for anybody who's listening, including yourself. So where you go from one personality that was resourceful for a stage in your life to a new personality, right? So 36-year-old Elliot can't think, act, and behave like 24-year-old Elliot. So there has to be, across the period of 12 years, sort of a transmutation and a purging of old ways. So you might find yourself in one of these seasons where you've jumped from one personality to another because the old personality was no longer resourceful for the stage that you're going into right now. Do you ever notice? So people who have tendency towards suicide, they have suicidal thoughts. Have you ever had suicidal thoughts? I did a video on this many years ago. This idea that I want to kill myself, I think is normal, it's natural, and in a way appropriate, because it's not necessarily that you need to kill your biological body, but it's an ego death that your soul is hankering for. It's calling you into a state of humility, right? To humble yourself, that bring yourself low so that you can rise up back again like a phoenix. So you say how to discover your true self. I'm going to say there is no true self. I know that might sound strange, but you don't have a true self because you're too dynamic to have a true self. So any quote unquote true self that you make up is an idol. It's not true because you're dynamic, you're evolving, you are changing. Nobody stays the same. And people who have a real stuck, stiff, what's that word? Like petrified ego, those people are the ones that in many instances have the hardest times in life, especially when challenge comes. Think about the difference between a palm tree that blows in the wind and an oak tree that if a hurricane comes, the palm tree just lays flat, boom, and it comes back up. The oak tree gets uprooted. People who don't have enough permeability or flexibility within their egos to adjust with the change in the winds or the seasons, they get uprooted, and then they have a real crisis. You say, I'm having an identity crisis. I think your identity crisis is more a matter of your judging the shifts that you're going through rather than just being with the shift that you're going through. But I understand because I've been there before. So my invitation to you is just let yourself be. Just marvel at yourself. Wow, look at this. I'm different now. Right? And then here's the other thing too. People hate when you change, so they will do everything that they can to keep you the same. I don't know how long you've been a fan of mine, but people say, oh, the old Elliot or the new Elliot or and because they want to keep me stuck in an ego that was comfortable for them to relate to. But that's impossible. It's impossible for any of us, especially those of us like yourself and I, who have pliable ego pliability. And it's not about having low boundaries like a schizoid. A schizoid has low boundaries. It's not about having no boundaries, meaning like I just become whatever the energy of the day is. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Or I take on other people's sentiment, Schizoids will tend to like take on other people's anger or take on, like they don't have their own identity. So they become whatever is prominent. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about more like a kung fu, right? I hear the Shaolin monks, they named themselves after the Shaolin tree because the Shaolin tree was a very strong tree, but very flexible. So it's a sort of martial art, if you will, to be flexible enough in your ego to evolve over time. Hope that helps, dude. Done. Okay. Let's see. I'm sure I've missed some of these, but Colleen's sending me. Okay. I got one from Suamente Bellegroso. He says, Jesus Christ didn't die for us. Jesus Christ didn't die for us. He gave up a 3-day weekend. If you don't sin, Jesus died in vain. Okay. You must be a theologian, because you're smarter than me. My theology ain't that strong to understand anything you just said. So, Tory Black, the god of war. Let me go before that. I'm scrolling through what Colleen sent me, so give me a moment here, guys. I'm trying to get to everybody. This is George. Okay. Yo, Elliot, I follow you since 2013. I learned many things from you, and I'm very grateful. My only concern lately is how to reach financial independence, like get my own house, pay off my debts. I want to bring you back to when I was in that state, bro. I'm going to go there with you out of a sense of compassion, because I know exactly where you are, bro. I remember when I first moved to Florida and I was working as a personal trainer, and I had my wife and I had one child. So I don't even know if you have responsibilities like that. I was $90,000 in debt. I had my student loans, my wife's student loans. We were living in my parents' house, and I was a personal trainer trying to get clients, and I had a daughter. And I remember hustling, right? And hustle doesn't necessarily mean that you're producing. It just means you're doing stuff. I remember doing stuff. One of the stuff that I was doing was I'd walk through the wealthy neighborhoods and I would hang flyers on the door, hoping somebody would hire me as a personal trainer. It was this nice neighborhood called Old Northeast. And I remember walking through that neighborhood and looking at those houses and just dumbfounded, befuddled, totally confused about how do these people save money and buy a house like this? Even a down payment for a mortgage, because a down payment for a mortgage, you're talking $50,000. This was, my daughter's 18, almost 18, so this is like 16 years ago. $50,000, $60,000. I'm over here in massive amounts of debt. And I want a house for my family. And I can't imagine how people possibly do it. And I will tell you, it was a long, hard road. And I'll spell out a little bit of the journey for you, because I don't have an answer for you, but I want to give you hope, because that was the state I was in. Maybe worse than you, meaning I had me and my wife. She didn't work. That was our agreement. I wanted to keep her home. I had a daughter. I had both of our student loans, and I had $90,000 credit card debt. And then I got into more debt and an upside down mortgage. It was terrible. How did I pay off the debts? I hired a company that negotiated all my credit card debts for me. And even though I didn't have the money to pay like $3,000 a month to get through it, that was the deal that they came up with. And I busted my ass at Strength Camp Gym trying to make money by training people with trash out of the back of my van. That's where I started. And then around that time, something new came around. It was called the internet. Let me tell you, that's how old I am. And I had this sense, even before then, I'm going to figure out how to make money with this internet thing. And so I listened to a CD set. That's how old I am, by this guy. And it was called Multiple Streams of Income. And in it, he said, you can make an ebook, zero publishing, just a PDF, and you can sell it online and make money. And I made an ebook. And that led me down a path of self-publishing digital products. I made a football product that was a DVD that I sent to people's house. And then I met somebody that helped me publish something called Lean Hybrid Muscle. My point is that little by little, I started to see the light, and different graces came from God. And I was able to finally have my gym, but also make money on the side through the internet. Then YouTube came about. And I started making YouTube videos in 2007. It's just miraculous. Let me throw this out there too. A lot of these things that happened to me were miraculous. Meaning I had a goal, I had a vision, I knew what I wanted. I had a deep desire to do the right thing for my family. And even though I got up every day and I worked, and like I said, sometimes I was just doing stuff and it wasn't even productive, the grace of God carried me. And I wasn't even religious. I always thought of God, maybe agnostic. But it's not that I'm spewing, religious sentiment here for you to say, you need to be religious. I wasn't religious at all. But I look at my life and I realize, man, grace, God. I was into I was big into? The law of attraction. That's what I was into at the time. And I can't say it didn't work. Because a part of the law of attraction was have a vision, be grateful for the vision, and stay in gratitude. Stay grateful for what you have. Grateful for your vision and grateful for what you have, and be happy as if these things are unfolding for you. So that was very helpful to me. You say, my concern is reaching financial independence, like getting my own house and paying off my debt. Bro, if I could do it, if I did it, you could do it. I was ball and chain, multiple balls and chains, buddy. And I know we're living in a different time, but I got to remind you, I came up during the collapse of 2008. A lot of y'all don't even remember this, but in 2007, 2008, there was a big financial collapse, big bailouts of the banks, and the whole real estate market collapsed. I was paying a mortgage on a $150,000 house. It was a townhouse, and I had to go into foreclosure, and I only got like $40,000 for it. I had to pay the bank that, and then I was basically in bankruptcy for 7 years. I couldn't get a credit card. I couldn't get a mortgage. I couldn't do anything for 7 years. I had to rent. I was renting a house, and I was paying through my nose. At the end of that 7 years, my life started to evolve, and I was making enough money, and my credit got repaired, and then I bought my first house, which is the house that I bought right before this. Bro, I didn't buy my first house because the first one was a townhouse, and it all fell through. I don't even count that. It was bad. I didn't buy my first house until I was almost 40, bro. I was like 39 when we moved into that house. My first house. I'm 43, bro. I only bought my first house 3 years ago. And am I saying that to like bring myself low? I'm saying that to help bring you up. Like, yo, don't stress. If old Uncle E wasn't able to do it right off the bat, you don't need to do it right off the bat either. You're going to be all right. Every day, do what you got to do what's in front of you, one foot in front of the other, have hope and gratitude, and you'll be all right. Tori, the Black God of War. Let me get to you, bro. Give me a second here, fellas. I've always been a lone wolf. Now, 26. I want to make friendships and girlfriends. I talk and laugh with people. But as soon as another person comes along, it's like I get put on hold. How do I stop becoming an afterthought? Don't stop becoming an afterthought. Accept yourself as you are. The fact that you're in resistance about it is the problem. Let yourself be. Listen, I think we have too much emphasis and veneration on extroversion and popularity. You know that it says in the Bible that I'm not saying it properly because I'm not a Bible thumper. I don't memorize the Bible. But I know, especially about reading the fathers of the early church and stuff like that, they talk about how you don't want to be spoke highly about people. It is better that people don't speak highly about you, because when people speak highly about you, or people love you, or people put you to the center of attention, that is a slippery slope straight to hell, because then pride starts to kick in. And it is better, John Chrysostom even says this, the guy I was reading about earlier, he says, it is better for you that people misunderstand you and that they do not hold you in high regard, and that you could kind of slip off into the background. This is what a lot of the Christian saints, fathers of the early church, they would assert. They would basically say, woe is the guy who everybody likes you, right? Jesus says this in some regard. I don't know exactly the quote, but he says something to the effect of like, blessed are those who people don't like you, right? And he says they're going to hate you for my sake. They hated me. And Jesus accepted himself as somebody who they were going to hate. And he said that. He said, they're going to hate me. And guess what, fellas? They're going to hate you too. Just be with it. Be okay with it. And if they start talking well about you, beware. So you say, I've always been a lone wolf, but let yourself be a lone wolf. What's wrong with being a lone wolf? You say, I want to make friends and girlfriends. I talk and laugh with people. Good, you talk and laugh with people. That's fine. That's you exercising being yourself. But if someone comes along, I get put on hold. How do I stop becoming an afterthought? And you also making judgments in regard to what is happening when people come along. Don't be so greedy for attention. You know who are the greediest people? The people that don't have. People like to say that, oh, rich people are greedy, but that's not true. Rich people aren't greedy. They don't have to be greedy. They got everything. The greediest person is the person that doesn't have, because that person's always thinking about what they don't have, set when somebody else takes it away from them. It's sort of like the attitude that you're having right now. Somebody else comes along. It doesn't mean that they're taking attention away from you. If you have an abundant mindset, you realize, oh, there's enough. There's enough. He's allowed to be in this conversation too. But because you're greedy, because you're needy, which is even a better way to say it, because you're needy, but you're greedy, when that person comes along, rather than having an abundant mindset, you're saying, oh, they took what was mine. That's not fair. They came and took my attention. I see little girls behaving that way. You know how? Because I have daughters. And I remember when my daughters were going to school, I remember one of my daughters in particular, she was so upset because she was like, every time I have a friend and bring her over, then my sister becomes her friend, and that's not fair. That's kind of how you're behaving. Like a little girl. I bring my friend over and it's not fair because my sister is now a friend with my friend. And you know what that means? There's not enough to go around. So just let yourself be. You're thinking too much. That's my opinion, bro. Okay. Roy. Yo, Uncle E. I realize I've been raised a son husband. How can I assert my frame without resenting and cutting off my mother? Appreciate your wisdom. Well, I'm gonna pull out a good old Jesse Lee Peterson on you here and say you got to forgive your mom. You got to forgive your mom, and then you got to move away from her. So remember earlier I was talking about initiation. This is very important. Anthropologists understand that there is a pattern associated with all masculine initiation, that there's a predictable pattern, and our ancestors understood the requirements necessary and to be initiated. And the pattern is like this: movement away from the world of the mother, atonement with the world of the father. And what this would look like practically in these tribes, these traditional societies, I'm better off saying, is that when the boy starts getting too big for his britches, both the mothers, the women of the society, and the fathers, they look at each other and they wink because they know, okay, it's time. It's time. And they conspire, the women and the men. And the women, they assent to this also because they want strong men in their society. They don't want their boys to be little weaklings. You have a mother that made you a son husband. There's many different reasons why that happens, but one of them is which your mother wants to keep the boy weak. The son husband happens one of two ways generally. The mother wants to keep the boy weak and small so that she feels powerful over him, or she seduces him and tries to build him up to be the husband her husband never was, right? So she either becomes like his little toy husband, right? Beta male husband, or she tries to bolster him and lift him up to be the alpha male that her husband never was. Both create an incestual relationship. But our ancestors understood, especially the women, that don't do that. Don't do that because you ruined the boy. And they couldn't afford to have ruined men in traditional societies. All our men are ruined right now. And we can't afford it, if you notice. But we're here. But they understood we can't have ruined men. We need our men to be strong. So they would conspire with the fathers, and an event like this would look like this. The fathers, the patriarchs, the elders, they will burst into the hut where the boy is over there, maybe like sitting on the couch with his VR headset, right? And telling his mom, bring him some chips. And they were busting with some masks. Just imagine like today, they were probably back in the day where they have like these big like Shaka Zulu masks and shit. But today, imagine like they had on like a stocking mask, right? Like, you know, all black and just the eyes. Boom! With some guns. And drag the boy out. And the mom is pretending, oh, don't hurt my boy. Oh, don't hurt my boy. And the boy is shitting his pants, scared. And the fathers, because you have to scare a boy in order to change him. Men have to be shaken out of their doldrums. Initiation doesn't happen through conversation. You learn by experience. And so it's a shock to the ego. Remember we were talking about ego before? So that whole experience of trauma, they come in, bang, they take them and they pull them out and they take them off into the woods somewhere. That's meant to create a trauma to the old infantile ego. Break the boy ego. They take him out into the woods. And a number of things they would do. They would subject him to austerities, fasting, things of that sort, challenges, hunting, things of that sort, and meaning. And this is where the fathers would instill religion, mythology, story, meaning and purpose into the boy's heart, because that meaning and that purpose cannot work its way in unless the boy is humbled. So he gets humbled by the fathers. You know, today they call that hazing, right? You can't do this stuff right now because, you know, they'll call it hazing and you go to jail. That's how soft our society is. But noble. This is noble leadership. This is doing it out of love for the boy. It's not doing it out of malice. It's not doing it out of trying to hurt the boy. It's out of love for the boy and love for the society. So we go through all this. But people don't know that these days. They don't understand tough love. Nobody really believes that there's such thing as tough love. Everything is about my feelings. Oh, you hurt me. So the boy would be broken down and built back up only to come back into the society and have a totally different relationship to the material world, which is where the word mother comes from, matter. So everything that matters in the society changes. Mother changes. The whole matrix changes. Why? Because the patriarchs put a new pattern in the boy. And so you say, you know, how can I assert my frame without resenting my mother and cutting her off? The way you separate from your mother without having elder men, and I don't know what your situation is. If you have a father, if you had men in your life, most of you, I get it. A lot of y'all don't. Is you have to go to your mother. This is Jesse Lee Peterson. Go watch his videos on YouTube. Go to your mother and you have to forgive her. You got to tell her, I forgive you. And she's going to be like, for what? What are you forgiving me for? I didn't do nothing but everything for you. And you have to stay there with a straight face and explain to her by running my father away, by lying to me about my dad, by making me a son husband, by all the things that you now know and you can see from your objective perspective and see how mothers destroy their sons. Listen to Jesse Lee. This is all Jesse Lee stuff. I learned this from him. And how mothers destroy their sons, you have to go and you have to tell her, I forgive you for all that. And that way you can be free. The same way that that movement away from that, in other words, that scary moment when that boy gets removed from the home by the masked men, this is your moment to do that. Except the scary thing that you're facing isn't the masked men. It's your own guilt, your own shame, your own fear of your mommy. You got to get over the fear of your mommy. And then you get to assert your frame, you talk about, by subjecting yourself to the challenges and rigors of a masculine life. One practice of which is fasting. You can fast. Go on I hate the word adventure. It's just too Disney-fied. But go travel and spend some time in the wilderness for a while, right? Go camping. Get yourself nothing but a tent and go live out for a month in the wild, you know, like not totally wild, but like a camping site. Cut yourself off from technology for a while and just spend some time in prayer and meditation. That's what atonement with the Father is. Atonement with the Father is atonement with God the Father, ultimately, because it's our earthly fathers that lead us to God the Father. That's a part of the reason why the Marxists wanted to destroy the face of the Father in our society, because when you destroy the face of the Father, you destroy atonement with God the Father. So the best way to make a society communist, atheistic communist, is to destroy the Father, the integrity of the Father, the face of the Father. Fathers in our society, fathers look bad, they look stupid, or they look tyrannical, or they just don't exist at all. So you might not have a father in that way, but you get to go directly to the Father through the Son. And that's the beautiful thing about Jesus Christ, is that he is a father of sorts, in that God the Father is just so big and so expansive and so immortal that we can't relate to him. And that's why he poured himself out into the Son and gave us Jesus Christ. And as you atone with Christ, you're atoning with the Father, because he represents the Father. He comes in the name of the Father. You see what I'm saying? So this is all just stuff for you to chew on, fellas. Do it what you want, but that's just stuff for you to chew on. Hope that helps, dude. Let's see. Okay, this is from Noni. Let's see, make sure I'm getting all these. Patrick. Hey, Patrick, thank you for the $1.99. Longshanks. Jay Velez. Phoenix Compilations. Okay, Roy, so I just did yours. Phoenix Compilations. I want to forgive my father for the horrible things he's done to me and my family as a tyrant, but he refuses to accept responsibility for his actions. Don't worry about him accepting anything. You just forgive him. And if he has a problem with your forgiveness, just understand that forgiveness is for you. You forgive him in your heart. You truly, absolutely, 100% wash clean any feelings, both good and bad. This is a part of the moving away from the world of the mother. It has to do with removing emotions, emotional attachment to our caregivers. Your father, whatever anger you have in your heart, resolve it completely. And here's a promise that Christ makes in the New Testament. He says that if you come to the temple, meaning you want to come to God the Father, you come to the temple, you want to atone with God the Father, you want to be one with the universe, however New Agers want to say it. But if you want to atone with the Father, you want to be one with God the Father, and you come to the temple with a sacrifice, which is the way that they would atone, the old guys back in the day. He said, but you have something against your brother, meaning you angry with somebody. He says, you got to go and you got to fix that first. He says, go and forgive that person first. Otherwise, your sacrifice will be a sacrilege. God can't accept your sacrifice because you got anger in your heart. And God is a forgiving God. That's what part of what Jesus came to teach us, is that God has mercy. But God is logical. And he says, and Jesus gives all kinds of examples of this. He gives all kinds of parables about this. God is logical. He's like, wait a second. I forgive you, bro. And I forgive you because of all the dumb things you've done as a sinner. And anytime you did anything like jerking off or, all that kind of dumb stuff that we do, which is a perversion of his creation, so it's an affront to him, he's willing to forgive, have mercy on you, but you're not forgiving this guy. There's a story where Jesus is like, there's a guy, he goes to his boss and he owes his boss $1,000, right? This guy, maybe he's like slave owner or something, but he's like a superior. And goes to his superior and he's like, I owe you $1,000, but I don't have any money. I can't pay you. So the superior is like, okay, I forgive you. You don't have to pay the $1,000. And he's like, oh, wow, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then he's walking down the street and a guy owes him $100. And he's like, you owe me $100. Where's my money? I don't forgive you. I'm taking you to court until I get my money. And then the authority, the guy that he owed $1,000 to, found out. And he was like, yo, bro, I forgive you. I forgive you $1,000 and you picking pennies with this dude? So he threw him in jail. The whole point is you can't go anywhere in the spiritual life, in your spiritual walk, in your becoming the strongest version of yourself if you don't forgive your father. So that's what you got to do. You got to find it in your heart to forgive your dad. Done. Jay Velez, hey, Elliot, I plan on joining the Air Force. Oh, by the way, thank you. If I don't say thank you, I mean thank you. Thank you, Phoenix Compilations, $4.99, buddy. Jay Velez, $4.99, thank you. Yo, Elliot, I'm planning on joining the Air Force. What are your thoughts and your opinions? Man, I think first of all, I hold high all servicemen. I believe that in a previous life, I was a serviceman. As I was growing into a young man, I desired greatly to be a Marine. It didn't unfold for me in this life, but there's a part of me that's a Marine. I know I am. My nephew went into the Marines as a result because he was very young when I was the age where I was into the Marines, and I was like, had the posters, I was wearing the shirts, and I would like read the books, and he was like a little kid, and I think that impressed him. And now, he's in his 20s and he's a Marine. So he like lived my dream, right? And it just didn't work out for me that way. So I want to say that I hold in high regard servicemen, warriors, really do. But damn, are we live in some diabolical times and the leadership is bad. You're signing your soul over to obedience, because that's what you're going to do, right? We were talking about obedience before. And if you're in the service is obedient, you have obedience. You don't own your body anymore. And that's okay if it's to a righteous authority. But they're going to pinprick you with all kinds of stuff against your will. You don't get a choice. All those guys that were in the military that had to take the vax, they didn't have a choice. There could be an unjust war that is fought for the oligarchs' greed, right? For their own greed and narcissism and psychopathy and craziness. And you got to go fight that war. I wish we were still living in a time, and I don't know if it ever really existed. Maybe it's just maybe I'm nostalgic. Maybe I'm like, daydreaming. But to fight a noble war. I would have liked to be fighting the Battle of Lepanto. Go look up the Battle of Lepanto. It was in Europe. I would want to have fought like that. I would have liked to have fought in the first Crusades. We've been taught a lie about what the Crusades were in many regards also too. But I do think that maybe there was some misguided crusades. I think there were multiple, but the first one I think was very honorable. I would want to fight in an honorable, a just war, but I don't think we have those anymore. So if you're planning on joining the Air Force, that's your karma, that's your path in life, then you do it fully. And so I'll leave you with that part right there. I'm just telling you what I think about it personally. But if you go, I tip my hat to you, I salute you, and I encourage you, do it 100%. If you're going to do it, no looking back, 100%. You obey, you dedicate your life. That's what it is. They tell you jump, you say how high, because now that becomes in Chinese, I don't know how you call it, but like Taoist terms, that's your dharma. Your dharma is what you are. And if you are a warrior, you're just a warrior through and through. And you're free to fulfill your vocation. And unless you're actively, personally committing sins against people, you're just following orders. You're free from the stain of your leader's sins, because you're just acting out your vocation. You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of merit. There's a lot of merit to it. It's tough, but there's a lot of merit to it, dude. So I wish you the best. Do it. Don't have a second guess. Don't half step. If you can do it, jump 2 feet in. Noni Dolgan. Hey, by the way, fellas, I'm going to wrap up. Don't send me any more super chats. I'm going to wrap up whoever's here right now, whatever ones I see right now, because I'm going to my daughter's soccer game. And so I got to wrap up and get going for that. Noni. Yo, Uncle E, I have issues talking in big groups. I don't want to talk and I just shut up. I love talking. One-on-one, no problem, but in big groups. Even public, like on a bus, I lower my voice. Appreciate you. Appreciate yourself. Appreciate yourself as you are. Don't try to change it. Why? You're fine just the way you are. Once again, as I said to the other young man, we hold high in an unresourceful way, extroversion, like that's the only way to be, because Hollywood. To be a guy that likes to talk a lot when you're with just a small group or one-on-one person, that's you being comfortable in the state in which you're most comfortable, and that's okay. And you receive that as being comfortable. When you're being quiet in big groups, you're also comfortable. You're comfortable being quiet. Do you know how many people can't be comfortable being quiet in big groups? That they must talk? You know how many people? They can't just shut up in big groups. They're in a big group. They got to be the center of attention because they're uncomfortable being quiet. So you only uncomfortable about being quiet because you think that guy is better than you at doing what he's doing, rather than just recognizing, oh, I'm actually very comfortable being quiet. Just be you. Now, if that's causing you harm in your life, well, then you just do something different. But if you're just judging yourself because, stop it. Oh man, still a lot here. I don't want to miss y'all. Jason Wright, $10. Thank you, brother. Or 10 pounds, whatever it is. Appreciate you sharing your wisdom and for reminding us all of the lessons of Christianity. God bless. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. Super chat. Kuhando, $8.99. Hey, Unc, I converted to Islam recently, but I feel like Christianity is calling me back. I grew up Christian, but never practiced it. How should I approach finding the truth? I want to do the right thing. Well, from what I understand, Muslims venerate Jesus Christ as a prophet. They do not receive the Trinitarian view and see that he is God pouring himself out into human form. But from what I understand, Muslims love Jesus, peace be upon him. They probably are more respectful. Muslims are probably more respectful of Jesus' name than Christians, because they say peace be upon him. That's a respectful way. They even speak more respectfully of Mary than Protestants do. Protestants hate Mary. They hate the Mother of God. I have my Mary pictures up here because I'm Catholic and we venerate the Mother of God, and Muslims do too. So I think Muslims and Catholics have more in common than Catholics and Protestants in many regards. But anyway, you're asking me if you should go back. I'm saying I don't think that there's any need. I may be a bad Catholic by saying this. I just say learn all you can learn about the truth of Jesus Christ through the perspective that you are now seeing life through, Islam, and then give it a chance to read the words of Jesus himself and how he calls himself the bread of life. He says, nobody will come to the Father but through me. He says, I am the truth. This is crazy. Muhammad, peace be upon him, says this is the truth. Buddha says, this is the truth. Zoroaster says, this is the truth. Baha'u'llah says, this is the truth, right? These are all prophets and manifestations. They say, that's the truth. Jesus says, I am the truth. He speaks like he's God. So anybody who reads the words of Christ and denies that he is God incarnate is not reading Jesus Christ. So see life from the perspective that you are gleaning it now, and be open to what Jesus actually says about himself and see what happens. Should I approach finding the truth? I think we're all trying to find the truth, bro. I think we're all, and I don't denigrate anybody in any regard who is sincerely on a path of trying to find the truth. Thank you. Digi Nomad. Thank you for your, I think it's Canadian bucks. Elliot, how do you reconcile the blasphemy in the church by the Pope, cardinals, and others contrary to the word of God? Few stand against the blasphemy. The same way, so how do I reconcile it? That's your question. The same way that I am an American through and through, even though fake President Biden, even though the governors and the senators and the Congress rape us. I don't try to be Canadian. I don't try to be Mexican. I don't say I'm a world citizen just because I don't like the hierarchy. I understand that our hierarchy, our government has been subverted since at least 1917 or 1913 when it was 1913 when the Federal Reserve Act was passed. So the same way that I remain an American, even though I know that my government has been subverted and I'm being ruled by an outside deep state, if you will. But I don't deny that I'm American and I love America. I love all that America stands for, and I'll be American through and through. It's the same way that I understand that there's a deep church and that there's ample evidence that the church has been subverted in the same way that the American government has been subverted. Look at the work of Taylor Marshall, Dr. Taylor Marshall. He's got a book called Infiltration, which talks about, and he quotes Bella Dodd in terms of infiltrating the church through the seminaries by putting, I think it was 1,100 communists and homosexuals into the seminary. The church has been subverted from the outside in. The three M's, I'm not going to say their whole name, right? Just like I don't say Jayish, right? Because these are the people that rule our world and they don't like to be called out. You can't call them out for what they've done. But the brother men, we'll call them that, have been seeking to subvert the church for a very, very, very long time. And there's also ample evidence that the current Pope is a brother man. They like to put their hands in a shirt like this. And there's pictures of Bergoglio with his hand in the shirt like this. Fake President Biden, I don't know. But they say, as goes the church, so goes the world. So I will leave you with this. Even Jesus's disciples, his group, his little government, his little clan, right, of leaders were subverted. Judas subverted Jesus's clan. And he brought ill to the hierarchy. What are we calling it? I'll just call it his governing body, right? He brought ill into his governing body. He brought chaos and death, literal death into Jesus's governing body. You don't hate Jesus because of what Judas did. You follow me? You don't hate Jesus because of what the subverter did. And he caused, because of his subversion, he caused Peter to slip. Remember, Peter denied Christ 3 times? He caused the whole crew to slip up because of the subverter. You don't hate Jesus because of Judas. I don't hate America because of the subversion, and I don't hate the church because of its subversion, its subverters. You see what I'm saying? So there I go with that, and I hope that makes sense, dude. Done. Mr. Mike, Nike and Mike. This is gonna be after this. I gotta go, guys. I got a couple more here. Mr. Nike Mikey 77. As a realist, how can one truly have 100% faith in God / Jesus? Go from agnostic to genuinely having faith and believing and having it at last. Also, how can you be confident in one religion and believe every other one is wrong? Okay, how can you have faith in Jesus or have faith that there's a God? That's a very practical answer. And if you just track back far enough to how we got here, it's completely impractical to think that there wasn't a creator. Nothing can't come from nothing. Something can't come from nothing. And so I'm going to do this maybe next time. I'm going to do a whole talk on the proofs of God by Thomas Aquinas, because I'm not going to do it justice right now, especially since I'm trying to rush. And so if you really want to know, if you're really interested, go on Google and look up the proofs of God as given by Thomas Aquinas. And he gives the most rational philosophical reasons for existence in God. And I don't have time for ranting. I'm gonna have to leave it at that. And how can you be so confident in one religion and believe every other one is wrong? Here's the thing, I don't believe every other one is wrong, but they lack an element of truth. I think that here's the thing with truth and falsehood. You can subscribe to something that is full of truth, but lacks an essential truth. It doesn't mean that it's false, but it lacks an essential truth. It's partial truth. And so many religions are true, but they lack an essential truth. And so I'll leave it at that. My sentiment isn't that one is right and all is wrong. One is complete and others are incomplete. Let's see. Robert Milkshake, I see your $20 there, brother. And I thought you'd have a question, but you didn't. You just giving old Uncle E some love. I appreciate you. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate you guys. This was fun. This was great. I'm going to go watch my daughter play soccer right now. And I'll be back with you guys next week. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll probably see you on Monday. Be well. Done.